Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Richards and I'm with one of our regular parliamentarians, Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby, and now, not for the first time, author, though more of that much later on SG TV. Austin, welcome as ever. First of all, a question that I know is close to your heart in your own constituency here in Grimsby. What's the progress report with the tower blocks on Freeman Street?
Well, we're fighting the proposal to demolish the tower blocks. Shoreline don't want to appear to give way, but what I'd like is that they have a partial demolition, keep three, demolish three. And I think we need the tower blocks to provide accommodation in that kind of area, and particularly Nelson House, which is a kind of old people's home in the sky. And the residents there want to stay. They like it, they're happy there. Why pull it down? So the fight goes on.
And what do you think are your chances?
Well, I hope so. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but we shall fight hard by every means available.
Quite right too. Moving on to a much bigger national issue here. One of the big things in your party, in the Labour Party this month, is the resignation of either Johan Lamont or Joanne Lamont, I'm troubled by her pronunciation, as the leader of the Labour Party, saying that the Central Labour Party regards Scotland as a branch office. and an absolute disarray. It's worse than Macbeth up there at the moment in the Labour Party. How have you got into this pickle?
Well, one of our problems in the Labour Party is that the Labour Party in London regards every Labour Party, Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Scotland, as a branch office, and they're not. They need their own life and their own vigour and their own to determine their own policies. I think in Scotland there's a particular problem because of the referendum, which was the most exciting thing they've had in Scotland for years, probably since Bannockburn. But it was a situation where Labour people who want change and want better social provision and an end to austerity really had to support the SNP if they're going to get anywhere, because if they're going to wait for a British general election, they'll have to wait till May next year, and the hope then of changing the whole British government, whereas if they got Home Rule, they could get change much faster. And I think that caused a lot of people in the Labour Party in Scotland to vote for Home Rule. And therefore, the Labour Party is disunited and upset because the Home Rule movement had a real impetus and a real excitement, which the Labour Party has been trying to generate for ages. Scotland is the one socialist part of the country left. Well, and it's a shame to see it split.
Well, so many of those SNP voters, 45% voted for independence in the referendum. So many of those would be traditional Labour voters. And
yes,
last week's YouGov poll suggests that now as many as 30 Scottish seats would go to the SNP rather than to Labour. Because those Labour voters have transferred their allegiance. That means that Labour can't ever have a majority government in Westminster without that Scottish bloc.
If we lost Scotland altogether, it would be very difficult to have a Labour government in Westminster.
Well,
I think the estimate is exaggerated. I think we shall lose some seats because the wind is in the sails of the SNP at the moment, and they're not going to give up. And I think people who've voted for Home Rule might well vote for the SNP. We shall lose seats probably, but not many.
Well, I mean, have you not lost that traditional bloc Labour vote to the SNP? You don't think you've lost that forever?
We shall gain seats in the rest of the country. We shall gain seats in England. So on balance, I think though it weakens us and it doesn't help, it won't defeat us.
One of the problems with Labour in Scotland, only 15% of Scots, according to that YouGov poll last week, trust Ed Miliband. I don't have a figure for England, but there is we often talk about this, but one of your problems is the leader and his advocacy and his charisma.
In the sense that he doesn't present an exciting presence like Tony Blair used to, I think he's surrounded by people who are keeping the real Ed under wraps because he's a good guy. I voted for him. I support him. I think, it's pointless talking of change of leadership at this stage in the electoral cycle. I think we've got to bring out the real Ed Miliband to the people. I think he's been too cautious. I think we need more radical policies which are going to excite people because people want hope and they want change and they want things to get better. And we're not promising that. We're being very cautious and saying, well, we continue to fight debt. We shall only be able gradually to restore the cuts. I think they want change now, and I think there are ways it could be done. So it's time for a change in approach and a much more dynamic and positive approach for Labour, not for a change in the leader.
Well, you loyal support for the leader of your own party. If I'm going to get your insight across the floor of the House to the leader of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister, his backbenchers can't stand the promises he's made to Scotland. They're not sure about
Well,
his...
the backbenchers can't stand him.
They can't stand him. They can't stand his stance on Europe. They don't trust him on that. And now they're forcing him into a dreadful hole because he's just been given a bill for £1.7 million by the European Union. Do you think he'll survive to the next general election?
He'll survive. I think Boris Johnson will succeed after the election when the Tories are defeated. But I mean, let's face it, we haven't got at the moment an exciting choice of parties. People are actually asked to choose between two parties, neither of which they particularly like, and two leaders, neither of which they particularly like. It's not like previous elections where one party has had a huge head of steam and a leader who kind of is triumphant. So it's going to be a difficult choice to make, but I still think Labour will win. The problem is, will we win big enough to govern and to deal with the very serious problems this country faces? That's the problem. I can see Labour emerging as the largest single party.
But not necessarily a majority.
I don't see any party emerging with a majority to govern. I think the end of big government and big majorities, we've seen the end of that.
Just take it back down to your own seat here, to the local seat. You've been talking about the UKIP threat here. Your party's frontbench spokesman for business, Shadow Business Secretary Chuka Umana, has been saying that the Labour Party must not pander to the potential UKIP voters, must not try to have some sort of strengthening up of views on immigration or of xenophobia. And supporting Tony Blair's comments that the UKIP has a core of prejudice. Now, UKIP, you've been writing about comparisons between UKIP and Clacton, which of course voted for a UKIP member a few weeks ago, and because Clacton and Grimsby have similarities in that they have a largely white, very small ethnic diversity, not particularly well educated and high unemployment economies, that Grimsby has that same demographic as Clacton. How do you fight?
Are you insulting the people of Grimsby?
I know.
Are you talking about the MP not particularly well educated?
No, when I say not very well educated, I'm responsible for educating them. But this is a very, very prized plum for UKIP, isn't it?
We get nowhere by attacking UKIP. UKIP won't win seats next time simply because they haven't got votes concentrated enough in any constituency to win a seat, apart from possibly the two constituencies where Tories have defected and joined UKIP. They might keep those seats. I don't know. I doubt that they will, but they might. I think UKIP, from a Labour Party point of view, is best ignored because they consist of people who are alienated, whose world has been changed by globalisation, by the death of manufacturing and the one big industry in Grimsby, fishing or steel, whatever it was, or coal. And who are fed up, frankly. They're in debt, their wages aren't increasing, many are unemployed, they're less well educated than political elite, they haven't been educated beyond 16. And there's about a third of the population which is totally fed up of both parties and politics. Now, it's winning their support that is going to be the problem for the next election. I think we've got to make them an offer they can't refuse, and that is rebuilding the strength of this nation, this country, rebuilding manufacturing so that it can get back to the kind of good society we had.
Just more specifically on the Labour Party relationship with UKIP, there are voices in your party that sound as if they would like to outflank UKIP from the right, as it were. There are voices in your party apologising for
No, we can leave that to the Tories. They will try and outflank UKIP.
But you've got to fight voices in your own party who are apologising for your migration policies.
Try and outflank them. Nor should we.
If you were surprised...
But on the other hand, you don't defeat UKIP or explain the situation to people by saying European Union is a marvellous thing. Immigrants are good for us. We should have lots more of immigrants. You do it actually by concentrating on the main issue, which is to expand employment, jobs and opportunities in this country to make things better.
If you were surprised by UKIP results, and there's a by-election coming up next month in Rochester and Strood,
Which they probably will win.
do you think so?
Yeah. They might.
That Mark Reckless, who
It was a
defected
Labour
from the
seat
Tories,
up to 2010.
would it be if you had a very narrow majority, a very narrowly the largest party, but no overall majority in the next Parliament? Do you think Labour could ever go into government with UKIP support? Not necessarily a coalition, but
as I say,
money
I don't
bills?
think UKIP will get MPs elected. I think we shall get between 10 and 20 Liberal Democrats elected. And it's possible.
It's a bad result for them.
It's possible that people will talk of a coalition between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. They'll switch sides. But I doubt it. I think Labour will be the largest single party and will govern on its own, attempt to, as Harold Wilson did in 1974. Will enact some good popular legislation and hope to win a second election later in the year.
That would be with what's known as a confidence and supply support from perhaps the nationalist parties.
We should have that.
We'll come back to that point about the 1974 government in a moment. That was the February-October Parliament that Harold Wilson was Prime Minister for then. Austin, I'm sorry, we have to break there for one moment. I do apologise, I'm terribly sorry. We'll just stop there for a quick break. Please come back after these advertisements. We won't be long, and rejoin me with Austin Mitchell then. Thanks very much. Welcome back to Hot Topic. I'm talking to Austin Mitchell, Labour MP for Great Grimsby. Austin, we were interrupted there. We were speculating about the next Parliament, that if Labour had the largest party but no overall majority, do you think it could have a government then of any duration that could last next year?
Well, it depends whether other parties refuse supply and support and motions of confidence. I think, yes, we could last for several months. We could last possibly for a year. But I think it's important to enact popular measures like the gas utility price freeze first, and then challenge them to defeat that. And that's what would happen, I think. So I would expect an early second election, which will have a better chance of winning. Hopefully, having proved, the Labour government works.
Heard it here first, a two-election year in 2015.
Could be.
Rather exciting. Can I move just on to a much more, again, a more local issue here, but just as important, the Killinghome Triangle. Parliament, the joint committee of both Houses of Parliament has decided in favour of Able UK building its renewable energy resources at the Killinghome site, defeating ABP's, Associated British Ports, resistance to that idea. Is this a good thing?
Oh, it's a good thing, I think, unless we've got a clear decision. This has been delayed a long time by planning considerations, and it's time that it went ahead.
Well, it's been delayed.
The North Sea wind turbine industry is developing very rapidly. We need to get our stake in, and the Able development is a key part of it, because you can have Siemens in Hull, but you can have suppliers and engineering manufacturers on the Able premises, and you can also have the supply and support vessels in the fish dock. So we want our share, and there should be about 3,000 jobs in this Able development. I hope that ABP, having seen that the special committee has rejected their side of the story, will not take it any further. I hope they'll give way now.
What has been ABP's motive in resisting this development?
Well, they have a development that they want to pursue on some of the land.
They only thought that up just at the last minute, though, didn't they?
They have land that is necessary for the Able development, of which Able wanted to site something. So naturally, they wanted to hang on to land that they wanted to develop for themselves. I can understand that, but I think now this argument has gone on too long. Time to give way.
Can I just ask on a much wider issue about renewable energy? We're all benefiting on the Humber. We all want that extra investment, that subsidy that goes into it, because that's going to regenerate our economy. But is it a good thing in the end? Does the wind turbines at sea or on land, does it create enough energy to justify itself? Is it cost effective?
Oh, I think so. It is renewable. It's cheaper to run than nuclear. There's no problem with disposal like there is with with nuclear. I mean, we need diversity of inputs. We need gas, we need nuclear, but very little because it's very expensive. We need solar and we need wind energy, and I think, and we need some coal. Keep coal going. We need the diversity so that we don't lose any one element in it, and we can keep continuous supply. So I think there's got to be a spectacular and big development of wind energy in the North Sea. I'm in favour of developing wind farms on land as well, and solar panels on agricultural land. So I think that diversity is necessary, and I think the government is crazy to stop the development of wind power on land.
What would you say to those who oppose both land-based wind turbines and solar panel farms because they, on almost aesthetic grounds,
I'd
they
say
ruin
give up.
They grew in the countryside.
Say give up. We need diversity.
And those great fields and fields of mirrors. Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, solar energy isn't going to run here, is it? Have you looked outside the window?
You'll be surprised. It still is economic to develop solar energy this far north.
There's a by-election going on today for the Police and Crime Commission of South Yorkshire.
Yes.
And I'm afraid we're recording this too early to know the result, but it's caused by Sean Wright, who's resigned from that office because he had previously been in charge of looking after children in South Yorkshire, and obviously, as the Rotherham affair has revealed, that went disastrously wrong. That was absolutely horrible. Now, we don't know the result of that. How important, how political are police and crime commissioner elections? Are they party-sensitive elections?
Political. I think what was disappointing about the South Yorkshire one was, that Sean Wright took so long to offer his resignation after the Rotherham revelations. But secondly, that the vote in itself was so low, so few people turned out. I think personally that police commissioners aren't a bad idea. We can make them workable, and I think a lot depends on picking better people. Some are working very well.
I think Yvette Cooper, as Shadow Home Secretary on your front benches, has pledged to get rid of police and crime commissioners should Labour come into government. Well,
we've gone to and fro on it. We didn't like the idea. The Tories brought it up. Some of them have been very successful. The one in the Teesside, for instance, is a very good one. Some we've selected very curious people who I wouldn't put in charge of a cake stall, let alone a police force.
Will you mention names?
No.
Okay.
No, will I tell you the location of the cake stall?
Okay. The other issue that comes out of this, again, I'm afraid it's this tragic issue of exploiting children, and is the appointment of Fiona Woolf as heading up the commission that's investigating this. Now, she's a second choice after Lady Butler Schloss, who was found to be too close to various people, Leon Britton especially, but various people. And now Lady Woolf is being criticised that she can't do it, partly because she once had dinner, or 5 times had dinner with Leon Britton, who was Home Secretary back in the 1980s, but partly because she's a member of the establishment. She is Lord Mayor of London and a QC. You can't get much more establishment than that unless the Archbishop of Canterbury goes into
part of the
QC.
establishment. Well, she manifestly is. I think the problem there is not part of the establishment, it's the fact that she was a friend of, an associate of Leon Britton, and Leon Britton is accused of suppressing a file.
Well, it's been suggested that his office
suppressing a file brought in by Geoffrey Dickens, the MP, of possible paedophiles in high positions in British society. I know no more than that, but I think the fact that she was an associate of Leon Britton's is a reason for her stepping down. I think, you can't have people who are suspected of being friends or supporters of people involved in the inquiry, doing the inquiry.
But can I just broaden this idea of the establishment at large? When you have a job like this, and you're going to need somebody who has the skills of a lawyer, a great deal of experience in public service, and a lifetime used to making significant decisions, how are you going to choose somebody outside the establishment? The establishment is self-definingly the source of people we would choose for these jobs.
You choose somebody who's not been associated with any of the people involved in the issue on hand.
So you couldn't have anybody who, for
instance... She
instance...
isn't being turned down because she's part of the establishment. which has been turned down because of an association with Leon Britton and because there's arguments about Leon Britton's research and use of a file of paedophiles that was presented to him in the 80s. Now, that's all I know.
I'm just
the
making a
establish-
broader
the
point about the establishment, though.
The establishment is a fact. There is an establishment in Britain. There are people earning large sums of money, but there are people in power who have their own ways of looking at things, and that's part of the discontent in society. The great population feel that these people aren't listening to them, that decisions are being taken up there by establishment figures which affect the people down there, like, for instance, the number of immigrants, like we want to do what we do about Europe, being taken up there by people who aren't consulting the mass of the people. We are a democracy.
By definition, anybody who's in a position up there to take a decision, though, is, just by that fact, part of the establishment.
But they might have particular skills and particular abilities, but they have to listen to the people. The people are the basis of democracy.
One more local point. North East Lincolnshire Council has cut its subsidies for council tax from 83% to 75% this year as a way of trying to make the books work. Is that the right cut?
I'm afraid it's inevitable. North East Lincolnshire has been deprived of financial support by the government. It's had to face bigger cuts in government grants than most comparable authorities, and certainly comparable authorities in the south. It has been very badly treated. It's having a hard time, and it's struggling to make the best of that situation. It's not their fault. It's the fault of a government which cuts support to local government units like ours to centralise everything in London.
But this subsidy for council tax came out of central government money provided only for the first time last year.
Central government provides 93% of the finance of local government. And if you start cutting that down, you cut local services.
I just want to mention before we stop, I know that we're going to maybe cover this in more detail elsewhere on S3 TV another time. But you have written a book called Calendar Boy, about your time as a charismatic and successful television presenter. I've often wondered what that must feel like.
As a sex object and the clown prince of Yorkshire.
You still are indeed, Austin, no doubt.
Ah, well.
Published today, that is the 31st, I think it is, of October. Getting this out in time for Christmas, cashing in?
Well, I hope people will be interested in it, but it's really a kind of look back at the good old days of British television and the good old days of, I think, society. I wrote it when I was in hospital, and I was fairly depressed by a heart condition and by 2 operations. I thought, let's look back at the happy times.
I hope it cheered you up. Successful days of British television. We'll have to put that note, close it down there. Austin Mitchell, as ever, thank you very much. That's all we have time for this week, I'm afraid. Please join me again for Hot Topic next week. Until then, goodbye.